Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not so serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And we are back for an emergency episode on everything that's been happening with Prince Andrew this past week.
I know, it's been a lot that's happening this week, so we knew we couldn't wait.
Yeah.
For our next episode, we had to do a very quick wrap-up of everything that's been going on with Prince Andrew. But before we get into that, we wanted to very briefly return to a discussion we had last week.
Yeah, we've been talking about Kate's big birthday extravaganza and the photo shoot, and also her reputation as being work shy. And some of you kind of took issue with that and said that we were being like haters and that we were like having a go at stay-at-home mothers and raking them over the coals for trying to find a balance in their lives.
Yeah, I find this a little bit upsetting. I feel like it goes without saying that we take no issue at all with women who work in the home. And of course, it is healthy to set boundaries for work-life balance, all those kind of things. But I would say what I take issue with, and what probably Tom takes issue with as well, is the simultaneous and conflicting narratives that we get from the palace about Kate, which, you know, we hear both that she took an extended break from work to focus on raising her children, and that's why she doesn't work as much. But also, at the same time, we hear that she has spent 10 years working quietly, making these under-the-radar visits, having private meetings, doing all this stuff that we never hear about, because actually she's been establishing herself as this sort of worldwide respected authority in various fields. And I feel like the royals are trying to have it both ways, and I will not be played.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, because we really shouldn't forget that we were being sold the image of Kate as an expert. Like, an expert, top of the field in terms of her early years work. And I just don't think, like you say, the royals should be able to have it both ways.
But I just wanted to really quickly address that, because some of the feedback we heard is just so a million miles away from how we actually feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now we've got to get into Prince Andrew. On Wednesday, we got a terrific update on Virginia Giuffre's civil suit against Prince Andrew. We were delighted to learn that the judge, Lewis Kaplan, has denied Andrew's request that the case be dismissed, which means that the case will prepare to go to trial unless a settlement is agreed outside of court beforehand.
Yeah, so those are the two most likely options going forward, and it's worth, I think, remembering that the focus of a civil suit is really on compensating someone who's been harmed, not on punishing someone for their crime. So in a way it would make sense for Virginia to settle, and I do think that we should all support her if that happens. Like, primarily this case is about Virginia getting compensation for what she's been through, and if this is the best way, if settling is the best way to do it, she should go for it. I do feel like, as an anti-monarchist, I sometimes tend to focus on or speculate about the implications for Andrew and the monarchy more broadly with this case. But at the end of the day, like, this is about Virginia, so we should support her in whatever happens.
Of course. I do think the language that Virginia and her lawyers have been using implies that they do seem to want this to go to trial. Her lawyer, David Boyes, told the BBC on Thursday, "I think it's very important to Virginia Giuffre that this matter be resolved in a way that vindicates her and vindicates the other victims. I don't think she has a firm view as to exactly what a solution should be."
Yeah. So I think that, like you said, that does kind of imply the way that they seem to be leaning in terms of how they want to progress with this, which is towards trial.
Of course, we are rooting for Virginia and supporting whatever she wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. But, okay, the big bombshell news that followed this a day later was a statement from Buckingham Palace. With the Queen's approval and agreement, the Duke of York's military affiliations and royal patronages have been returned to the Queen. The Duke of York will continue not to undertake any public duties and is defending this case as a private citizen. Whoa!
Just to add to this, a royal source has said, and it's been widely reported, that Andrew will also stop using the style His Royal Highness in an official capacity.
Okay. I mean, some people, I think, that I've seen online have been wondering if the phrasing of the statement makes it seem like this was Andrew's kind of gracious idea and that, you know, he was like happy for all this to happen. But I'm not really sure.
Why is that?
Well, I do think that the statement could have been like more generous towards Andrew. Like it says that his titles have been returned rather than that he returned them to the Queen. So like in my mind that has the image of them taking the titles away from him by force and the patronages and stuff. But I do think there's that line that he will continue not to undertake any public duties, which I think sounds like it's kind of in there to reinforce this idea that they were already taking action by telling Andrew not to do anything. But I also think this is more to cover their own backs than to like try and protect Andrew in any way.
Yeah, and I thought it was striking that they announced this with a very simple statement on their social media. It was the white background with plain text on it, and it was just totally straightforward.
Yeah.
Apparently there were reports elsewhere that Prince Charles and Prince William had also been involved in discussions around this. So, you know, similar to what we've heard before about Andrew, that Will in particular is trying to be really involved with everything that's going on with him. And I think, you know, with this statement, one of the things that really stuck out to both of us, I think, was the line about Andrew being a private citizen and how he would defend the case as a private individual. Like, we don't know for sure how Andrew is funding his defence. There have been conflicting stories about the Queen's involvement or lack of involvement. I don't see how he could possibly be funding this case without support from the Queen.
Yeah. But yeah, this line does seem to imply that either he's funding himself or that his family are helping him out. And if they are helping him out, then clearly they want to make it very obvious that this is as a son or as a brother and not a case of the firm paying for the defence of an employee.
Yeah, and I had seen, I think the Daily Mail or the Mirror or one of those had a report that while the Queen may be providing financial support for the case, she would not be helping with any possible settlement. So I think there's just all these question marks around it that, you know, will one day be answered.
Yeah, but probably only when like the Official Secrets Act runs out or something.
Yeah, at the moment they're sort of hedging their bets until they know what the outcome of this case is.
But I do think all this begs the question, why has the palace made this statement now?
Yeah, because it is a very definite way of distancing themselves from Andrew, just like we were talking on our last episode, that the institution of the monarchy should be seen to be taking this situation very seriously and doing something permanent and definite about it, even though this is massively overdue.
Yeah.
That is what they're doing now. And, you know, it really was remarkable to me that the number one thing that I saw everybody saying about this news was finally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I totally echo that sentiment. It's been so long coming. But I mean, we'll probably never know the extent of what was known and when it was known by the Queen and other members of the royal family. But I do think it's fair to talk about the kinds of assumptions that the public is going to make after this statement has come out.
Yeah, because all along, I think royalists or quite hardline royalists had the belief that doing something like this, stripping Andrew of his titles, would be premature because Andrew hasn't been officially found to have done anything wrong, which I would imagine is a big part, or was a big part, of the crisis talks that were being had over the course of that day between the dismissal and the Queen's statement.
Yeah, I can just like imagine him basically repeating that over and over again to every member of his family.
And possibly the Queen saying it as well.
Yeah, yeah. But it is like an extension of that same logic that is leading a lot of people to wonder whether the royals and the Queen in particular know more than we do about this, that they were comfortable releasing this statement. Like, I was talking to someone who is interested in royal gossip and this kind of scandal and stuff, but who basically likes the royals and doesn't want them gone, which I think is quite indicative of like people generally in the UK.
Yeah.
But even they think that this statement means that the Queen knows that he is guilty, and it's more of a question of how long she's known for. Which is quite a shocking like stance to have, I think, as like someone who generally likes the royals.
And I would think that for a lot of people, the palace putting out a statement like this is something of a nail in the coffin for Andrew. Like, even if they had done it a bit earlier, it wouldn't have looked so bad for the royals, I think, or for Andrew. Like, you know, as we had said around the time of the Newsnight interview, I think that any employee of, you know, any other kind of firm, that was involved in the kind of mess that Andrew has been involved, they would be suspended immediately. And especially if they're a senior military officer, for example.
Yeah.
So in that case, if they had done it back then, you know, they really should have done it 10 years ago. But if they did it back after the time of the Newsnight interview in 2019, then it could have been spun as, oh, this is just a matter of course. We believe he is innocent, but certain processes have to be followed in this kind of circumstances, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the fact that it's only happened now when there is a real risk of details being made public in a court of law, like, that invites speculation that there is something coming that will be very damaging, both to Andrew and possibly the monarchy, and that the Queen has finally been forced to choose between the monarchy and Andrew.
Yeah.
Much as the palace press team often seem to be really bad at their jobs, they must have known the risk that they were taking with this statement in terms of how it would affect public opinion of Andrew. And yet they still went ahead with it. Like, even if it's not a nail in the coffin for Andrew as a member of the royal family or whatever, it's certainly a nail in the coffin for his reputation.
And I think, you know, there was also the factor of this open letter to the Queen that was organised by the anti-monarchist group Republic and signed by 152 military veterans, which was asking for Andrew to be removed from his military positions, which was striking for a number of reasons, in particular because they were appealing to the Queen not as a mother but as their commander-in-chief. And, you know, we talked before many times about how the royals often claim to have this connection with, this special connection with, this respect for, great admiration for the armed forces, but the fact that they insist on having someone like Prince Andrew in a role that they're not able to actually fulfill is incredibly disrespectful.
Yeah.
And to see the Queen being publicly reminded of her actual responsibilities to the armed forces was very interesting and quite satisfying, I thought.
Especially as, you know, there's definitely like a similar demographic between people who are royalists and people who feel very strongly about the armed forces and their importance in, you know, the UK. But as well as looking at what Andrew has lost this week, I do think it's worth noting what he has retained.
Yes. So he is still a vice admiral in the Navy because he did serve, although he didn't actually reach the rank of vice admiral while he was serving. This is kind of this weird tradition that I don't really fully understand, where royals continue to get promoted in the military even after they've been discharged or left or whatever, as if they were still serving.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
So while their peers continue to get promoted, even though they're off doing something else, they also get the promotion.
We didn't get any update, though, on the promotion to Admiral that he was, like, really keen to get for his 60th. So maybe that is gone.
Definitely, I would say.
But he also retains his place in the line of succession and his position as a Councillor of State. Now, there are 4 Councillors of State. Charles, Will and Harry are the others. And basically means that the Queen can delegate to them in cases of emergency or her incapacitation. The line of succession thing is perhaps quite obvious, and I think to a lot of people it seems quite irrelevant.
He is 9th in line.
Yeah, so that doesn't really sound, you know, like a big deal. But, you know, this is yet another huge problem with monarchies. Like, people would feel very differently if it was Charles or Will in this situation, someone who is much higher up.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we had talked about last week was whether Andrew was going to keep living in Royal Lodge, his home in Windsor, that he gets at an absolutely mind-bogglingly low rent.
Yeah.
Yes, he will continue to live there, as far as we know.
Until Will gets his way, apparently.
Yeah. And then his Duke of York title, he's still holding on to that.
Yeah, and I thought this was really interesting because I hadn't even really considered that they would take that away. But there has been a lot of talk from people in York about removing it. Like, the Labour MP for York Central, Rachel Maskell, has said, "It's untenable for the Duke of York to cling on to his title another day longer. This association with York must end. There's a very serious allegation made against this man of privilege and entitlement. I'm working with agencies to tackle sexual violence and misogyny."
And Darrell Smalley, a Liberal Democrat and a senior councillor for York, said that it had been argued that Andrew losing his titles was important to protect the military. So He said, I think the vast majority of people in York feel exactly the same in protecting the reputation of the city. York is fantastic. We have a lot to be proud of. And one thing we don't want is to be so burdened with this link to Prince Andrew. That makes so much sense to me. Like, if he was called the Duke of where I'm from, I would have major issues.
Yeah, definitely. Especially as, like, you know, people who are, you know, very pro the royals always like to talk about how much good they do for tourism. But, like, if tourists are coming to the UK and they'll be like, I'm not going to fucking York, that's where Andrew is from, or, you know, it all gets very mixed up because not everybody knows everything about the royals, and to have that kind of association, it could be really damaging. I just absolutely loved seeing this kind of publicly made outspoken comment from people about Andrew.
Me too. I think it's probably quite unlikely that he will lose the Duke of York title, but it would be fantastic if he did.
Yeah, I'd love that. But inevitably, there have been comparisons to how Prince Harry was treated when he stepped back from royal duties. And a lot of kind of staunch Sussex defenders were wondering how the British press would try to avoid talking about all the Andrew stuff. But I think, you know, we should make it clear that this was front page news across all the major newspapers in the UK.
Oh my God, yeah. For pretty much the entire week.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth pointing out, like, I find this criticism so tiresome because as far as I can remember, and obviously we do pay quite close attention to the media, but coverage of Andrew has been consistently very high profile in the UK. And I think, you know, a lot of people who are mostly interested in Harry and Meghan, or occasion Will, might not pay that much attention to other reports in the media related to the royals, but trust us.
They are there, and they're often very high profile. And
I mean, where do you think we get the stuff that we talk about on this podcast? It's
exactly
from reading the Sunday Times and the Telegraph and the Mail and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's not from, like, Instagram stories and stuff. It's from, like, sources being reported in the newspapers. But, yeah, there are similarities here between the treatment of Harry and the treatment of Andrew that are really, really shitty, I think.
Yeah, so the first thing is that they also no longer use their HRH titles. They use the same phrase to say they get to hang on to the HRH titles, they just can't use them in any official capacity.
Yeah. And it's the same deal then as well with the military titles being returned to the Queen.
Yeah, and I just think, you know, looking at this, there is no way that these two extremely different scenarios should have been handled in such a similar way, and one with, you have to say, a lot more enthusiasm than the other.
Yeah.
And almost gleefulness in the case of Harry and Meghan compared to this sorrow that seems to be running underneath all of the stuff to do with Andrew.
And, like, it coming in at the last possible minute as well. But if they do want to treat them the same, like, maybe there are some other similarities we should see. Like, will we see Andrew's taxpayer-funded security budget taken away?
I mean, I'd love to see it, but I do think it's doubtful.
Yeah, but, I mean, I would have said a lot of things were doubtful before this week, and I guess you just never know, as it is a very exciting time to be a royal podcaster.
Yeah, so some other questions as we head into the next week are the Times reports this weekend that Andrew's legal team are waiting to hear which members of his family will be asked to give evidence under oath. So David Boyes, Virginia's lawyer, has already suggested he might question Fergie and possibly Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie. They would likely be asked about Andrew's alibi for the night in 2001 when Virginia says she first had sex with Andrew in Ghislaine Maxwell's home in London. So, as we all remember from the Newsnight interview, Andrew said that he had taken Beatrice to a birthday party at a Pizza Express
in Woking.
And I do feel sorry for Beatrice and Eugenie. I have, like, limited sympathy, I think, for Fergie in this situation.
Because, limited to none in my case.
Like, she has really aligned herself with him in ways that she didn't need to at all.
And has reportedly been involved in doing all this Oppo research on Virginia.
Yeah.
Very ugly business. I do think it's so sad for Beatrice and Eugenie to be dealing with this. Like, Beatrice just had her baby.
Yeah.
They both have their own families. They're doing their own things now. They really don't need to be dragged into all this ugly stuff with their dad. Like, to have to talk about something that happened when you were 12. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, and I just can't imagine the kind of pressures she's under And I mean, I think it's very interesting that they can't find any other witnesses for this Pizza Express party.
Yeah, as we said last week, it really tests the limits of credibility.
Yeah. It has already been confirmed that Andrew will be expected to give his side of events in a statement under oath. And apparently he could face up to 7 hours of questioning by David Boies, Virginia's lawyer.
Yeah, and the Times says that Andrew is unlikely to travel to the United States for this, that he would make any statement in the presence of his London legal team. So we're not going to see Andrew in New York, most likely.
I mean, I don't think we're going to see Andrew anywhere other than UK for a very long time.
So yes, we feel very bad for Beatrice and Eugenie, but thrilled that this is all unfolding for Andrew.
Yeah.
Long past time.
Yeah. And we'll be following it as the year goes on. But other than Beatrice and Eugenie's involvement, we probably won't get any big updates about this for a little while now.
But we will be back in a couple of weeks to talk about whatever happens in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
So until then, thank you so much for listening and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, actually, yes. I didn't sweat at the time.